This video is safe for anime onlys. Blue Lock is the story of the journey to create the world's greatest striker, and in that vein we follow Isagi Yoichi's journey to accomplishing that goal. But before he could even dream of playing with the best, Isagi needed to mature as a striker. And what is an anime without rivals? In this video, I'll be going over the 4 rivals that helped mold Isagi Yoichi into a striker that could compete on the next level. But before we get to the rivals that helped him grow, we must first look at the rival that never was, unless you believe his fans. Frankly, Kira was barely in the story long enough to count as a rival. The problem was that while he may have surpassed Isagi in technique and fame, he did not have the mindset necessary to even get past the first test. Kira had only entered the program to prove it wrong about its statements on the importance of ego, but Isagi was already thinking of how to use Blue Lock's environment to change who he was and become the best striker in the world. And his ego told him that would never happen if he simply defeated the already injured Igagori. He would only succeed if he challenged and beat the strongest striker in their group. But that was just the first step in Isagi's journey, and to truly reach his full potential, he would have to face the king first. Oddly enough, Burū is the opponent who taught Isagi the most regarding his ability to score goals, which you wouldn't expect from the arrogant king. As I addressed in my video on what everyone gets wrong about Blue Lock, it was playing against Burū that Isagi truly began to grasp the concept of turning 0 into 1 and the effect that ability could have on one's team. But even more than that, it was by sparring with him and observing Burū that Isagi began to become familiar with the concept of formulas. I can say as many bad things as I want about Burū's attitude, but his skills are undeniable. There's a reason he was the top scorer of the building. Well, until Nagi started playing seriously anyway. He has a work ethic and understanding of himself that means that he had already fully grasped the formula of how to turn his weapon into a goal every single time. And without that formula, Isagi couldn't reliably score. That's why the only way he could make sure a goal was scored when he did get the ball and was confronted with the king was to pass to Konigami, who even subconsciously he knew was in a better position to score than Raichi, even though at a single glance, the opposite appeared true. When Burū told Isagi that he wasn't cut out to be a striker, he wasn't entirely wrong. Isagi's goal was to create at least one goal for his team to rally around, but he didn't have the skills and understanding to pull it off by himself. So he helped someone else who was capable of doing it. A compromise of his desire to be the world's best, but one that would have to be temporarily taken if Isagi truly planned on remaining in Blue Lock. But that raises the question of what exactly Isagi's weapon is. For that, we'll have to take a step back and look at Isagi's second rival. Nico has the great distinction of being the character that most resembles Isagi, a trait that allowed both of them to grow as strikers as a result of their match. Like Isagi, Nico's weapon is his spatial awareness and ability to detect the best ways to score goals along the pitch. But unlike Isagi, he was perfectly aware of this and made use of it throughout the match to interfere with Team Z's players, which made him a big problem. However, unlike Isagi, he hadn't yet faced proper consequences for his over-reliance on others. In his previous match, his team was so thoroughly crushed by Nagi's that the opportunity to fail because of a pass never happened. But Isagi began the story with a failure that was caused by his not taking a shot himself, and he was already feeling disappointed after having to pass to Konigami instead of being able to score by himself. And Isagi was able to teach Nico that by stealing his pass before it reached Okawa and resolving to evolve beyond his weakness. Nico fashioned himself as the puppeteer of the match, keeping everything in control from the shadows. But that mindset relies on giving others the chance to score over himself. No way for the world's greatest striker to behave. But despite the flaws of his playstyle, Nico still put Isagi on the path to realizing exactly what his weapon was: his superior spatial awareness and ability to smell goals, which was the very reason he could interrupt Team Y's play in the first place. And that created the opportunity for a winning goal for Team Z, one scored by Isagi himself, cementing his ability as a true striker. And Isagi would not be the only one to learn from this experience, as Nico resolved to also improve as a striker, using his ability not to prop up Okawa, but to score his own goals, allowing him to become the top scorer of his team and continue into the Blue Lock program, ready to face off against Isagi one day. But before he could come to truly understand his weapon and cement his ability as a striker, Isagi would have to face off against his most difficult rival yet, not because they were a strong opponent, but because they were a trusted ally. After all, the worst part of betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies.
勝てるはずない。だから俺はチームで勝つことを諦めて、一人で勝ち上がることにしたんだ。
Koan played the role of self-appointed captain and coach of Team Z, guiding them to victory and leading attempts to strategize the way to success. So it seemed unbelievable and cutting when he betrayed them to Team W. Koan had attempted to play a similar role in his old team, but none of them had the ambition to attempt to reach for the stars like he did. Despite his desire to drive his team forward, their lack of faith made that task almost impossible. And so he resolved to make sure he won at any cost, not realizing that in the process, he was giving up on ever becoming the world's greatest striker. Koan realized that he could bend the rules to ensure he moved forward as long as he had the position of top scorer on the team, a team he didn't have faith could win. And so he struck a deal with Team W to allow him to score 3 goals in exchange for help crushing his team, an act cementing his lack of faith in himself. Ego states that the mark of a great striker is the ability to consistently score goals by knowing how best to utilize their weapons so they could always score. But Koan relied on cheating his team and working with his enemy to score his goals. His desire for an assured victory made him incapable of comprehending that he could never be the best if he didn't at least have faith that he could beat others. He was preemptively surrendering to everyone above him.
クオン渡る。お前はストライカーとしてはゲのゲのゲ。つうかここにいる全員クソだ。
But even with the odds stacked against them, even with one of their teammates actively working against them, even with defeat practically staring them in the face, Isagi refused to give up. What Koan failed to realize is that Blue Lock was full of people who could match and even exceed his own ambition. But Isagi showed that he understood that himself with his confrontation with Chigiri, who burst into action when he saw how desperately Isagi played and was inspired to go back to who he was despite the fear of injury. Unlike Koan, Isagi had faith in his skills and his team and their ability to overcome the odds and obstacles in front of them. And it was that unbroken faith and uncompromised ego that led to the goal that allowed the match to end in a tie and keep their team in the running. Koan would later come to feel the same fire when they faced off against the seemingly unbeatable Team V, and that would drive him to act against his own best interests. Because how can you claim to want to be the world's best striker if your plan amounts to doing nothing? And while Isagi had knowledge of his weapon and had proven to be able to face his challenges, he now needed to solidify the formulas that would allow him to consistently produce goals as a striker. And that's something he would only be able to learn when put up against a significant challenge.
ねえレオ、サッカーって面白いんだね。
Nagi was the prodigy of Block 5. Having only played football for less than a year, he displayed incredible skill as a striker. But with all that skill, he never felt the need to truly try. He didn't take football seriously because he could never imagine losing. Because he'd never been faced against a significant challenge, Nagi had never had to truly hone his skill and put in effort to try and win. Why would he? He was so good at the game he could easily score a goal from anywhere if given a suitable setup. He, along with Ryo and Zantetsu, made for an unbelievable team that easily crushed Team Z's best efforts. Well, their best efforts while down a player. But while everyone was being swallowed by the despair of the genius, one person only saw this as a challenge: Bachira. To Bachira, the amazing and nigh unbelievable plays of Team V were simply an opportunity for them to improve while playing against a strong challenge. And in that way, he adapted and evolved his playstyle so that he would be able to score a goal, experimenting until he could succeed. This was the key to snatching victory from the jaws of defeat: to awaken. Ego defines someone awakening as the ability to compile all your experiences, skill and knowledge and apply it all at once in order to achieve your full potential and operate on a greater level than you had previously done. These players who already knew their weapons needed to know what new applications they would need in order to surpass the challenges in front of them. Chigiri did the same when faced with Zantetsu, who had a greater starting acceleration than him. But Chigiri had also observed the fact that he could catch up with Zantetsu and used it to determine that he could travel further, faster. And he'd previously shown that while in possession of the ball, he was perfectly capable of sending it forward and catching up to it, essentially passing the ball to himself. So instead of trapping the ball, he simply kicked it ahead so he could race his opponent. This adaptation was born from something Nagi didn't really understand at the time. It was a need to evolve, born from a challenge. But Nagi would begin finding that in himself in this match. As Team Z went on the offensive and he was cut off from real setups, he was in a desperate situation no one had ever put him in. And as he watched Team Z evolve, a new hunger awoke in him. A hunger to do better, to get stronger, to really try and put himself out there. And once the genius began making moves, the game became so much harder. But it was the difficulty of Nagi's awakening that forced Isagi to truly adapt, to reflect on his goals, to reflect on his abilities, and to determine exactly what he was doing wrong. While his spatial awareness allowed him to create opportunities and see through his opponent's plans, he wasn't taking advantage of it adequately in the scoring of goals. And in his desperation, he came to an epiphany. He realized that his weakness was that when he got a hold of the ball in critical moments, he was too physically weak to avoid having someone take it from him. That's why he needed to pass to Kunigami when confronted with Burū. And that realization came with the answer of what he needed to do to complete his formula for goals. And with that, Isagi finally realized exactly how to score his goal. He finally matured into the kind of striker that could move forward in Blue Lock to the second selection. However, all Isagi learned to do was score consistently, and he would need a lot more than that to beat the monsters that awaited him in the next stage of Blue Lock. And in his wake, he left a lot of people who would be just as affected from being his opponent as he was by them. But those are stories for another time. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe for more content, and tell me what you think of it in the comments below. Also, comment on who you think the most underrated player on Team Z was. I'm stuck between Iemon and Raichi. I know everyone's go-to answer is Gagamaru, but he's not that underrated. Thank you, and good day.